Hello, students. Today we're going to work on dividing polynomials by a monomial. So, might sound kind of complicated, but honestly, when we get into it, you're going to find today is a fairly simple process. So, part of what we need to do is make sure that we remember what polynomials and monomials are. So, some vocabulary to get us started. So, polynomials. If we have just one term, which the prefix for that meaning mono, one, monomials. That is a polynomial of one term. So some examples for that include 6, 4x to the third power, negative 5 to the second, b to the third power. All right, so notice with all of these, it's just a single term. We're not adding or subtracting anything after it. It's just one term. We have some multiplication. We're taking 4 times x to the third power. So here we do have some multiplication, but we do not have any addition or any subtraction. We do have a negative coefficient, a negative number out in front, but we're not adding or subtracting it to anything. Okay. And then here next we have a binomial meaning two terms. So we have a term and then plus or minus another term. Okay, so here we have 6x plus 2. So 6x is a term, 2 is a term, and we're adding those two terms together. So binomial, prefix bi meaning 2. And then trinomial, as you guessed it, trinomial meaning 3. We have 3 terms. So 3 terms separated by addition or subtraction. Separated by addition or subtraction. Okay. So polynomials, okay, if they're one term, they have a special name called monomials, binomials, 2 terms, trinomials, 3 terms, and then anything larger, we just call it a polynomial of so many terms. All right, so here's some example of more than just 3 terms. Some more vocabulary. If we look at a single term, for example, 5x to the second power, that 5 out in front is called a coefficient. It is a number in front of a variable. Versus, looking at the very end, here we have a number all by itself that is called a constant. So a coefficient and constants, these are numbers, but a coefficient is the number in front of a variable, and a constant is all by itself, no variables. And then we have our variables. Okay, normally we'll see the same variable used throughout the polynomial. In this case, we have both an x and a y. Not that common, but we do see it occasionally. And you're going to notice that in this one, this variable x is being raised to the second power. That's called an exponent. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be taking polynomials, and we're going to see these having more than just one term, and we're going to be dividing these by monomials. So for example, we have the polynomial, and it's put in parentheses to group it together, saying this all goes together. We have a trinomial. We have 18x to the fourth minus 10x to the second plus 6x to the seventh. And we're dividing this all by 2x to the second power. So what we can do is we can rewrite it. Instead of having it written out horizontally, we can put our fraction bar and notice that everything that was a part of the polynomial in that numerator, that trinomial, look how it's up on top, and then we're dividing it all by this monomial, 2x to the second power. And because there's only one term there in the denominator, what we can do is we can break this apart. We can rewrite every single term from the numerator divided by, each of these are being divided by that monomial in the denominator. And then what we're going to do is what we did last class, and that's just going to simplify each of these fractions, each of these rational expressions. So treat numbers like numbers. 18 divided by 2 is and always will be 9. But x to the fourth divided by x to the second, if we have 4 x's on top and we're canceling out 2 of them because we have x to the second on bottom, that means that we're going to be left with x to the second power. Okay, remember, we can write this out if needed. We can write this out as x and then x, x, x. And on the bottom, x times x. This x cancels with this one cancels with this one, and again, we're left with just x, 2 x's right here, x times x, which would be written as x to the second power. Okay, same thing with the next fraction. You can think of this as a negative 10 divided by 2, which is negative 5, and then x squared, which is x times x, over x squared, x times x. Both of these x's cancel with both of these x's, so the variable canceled. And then last, we have the fraction 6x to the 7th divided by 2x to the 2nd. Treat numbers like numbers. 6 divided by 2 is 3. X to the 7th divided by x to the 2nd. Instead of writing this all out, let's use the shortcut. The larger exponent's on top, which means the variable is going to land in the numerator. And then 7 minus 2 is going to give us 5. That's it. It really should be pretty simple today. So what you're going to do now is you're going to try. All right, so these are all located on Google Classroom. If you go to Google Classroom and go to the classwork section, okay, you're going to find today's date, and you're going to open up dividing a polynomial by a monomial, and you should see an attachment of a Google Sheet. Go ahead and click on it, and you're going to each have your own individual Google Sheet that you're able to type into. Now, you're only going to type into the yellow boxes, and if you do it correctly, I have it coded, so if you do it correctly, it's going to turn green. And if you do it incorrectly, it's going to turn red. All right, so for example, let's go ahead. I'm going to put this on paper. If you want to put it on paper as well, go ahead and do that. And then we're going to type it into the Google Sheet to make sure that we are correct. So the first thing that I'm going to do as we're getting started with these is I'm going to separate my first term, put it as a fraction over to the denominator, and then my second term in my numerator, put it as a fraction over the denominator. And then I'm going to simplify. 14 divided by 7 is 2. X to the third divided by x to the first, larger exponent in the numerator, 3 minus 1 is going to give me x to the second power. My second fraction, 7 divided by 7, is a 1. X divided by x is just going to cancel out. So my final answer should be 2x squared plus 1. So if I come here to make sure that I'm right, okay, notice that this is a different way for me to write this. It's kind of like the reverse of doing a multiplication chart. Here, if I take my row times my column, I should be getting these as my answers as I'm multiplying. All right, so if I'm taking 14 and dividing it by 7, again, I'm getting a 2. X to the third divided by x gave me x to the second power. So I'm going to type in x, and then I'm going to do Shift 6 for the caret button. And then I'm going to type into the second power. And then when I move off to my next screen, or to my next cell, I'm going to notice that my previous cell has now turned green, okay, indicating that I'm correct. And then we said already that 7x divided by 7x is going to give us 1. So I'm going to put my answer all together. I have 2x squared. Okay, that's just a single term. And then I'm going to add my other term because it's positive. If it was negative, I'd subtract it. So I'm going to put a plus 1. Okay. My next one, same thing. I'm going to come back, put it on my notes for now, and eventually I'm just going to start typing this into the Google Sheet. So I'm going to separate. I have 27x to the third all over 9x, and then a plus 18x squared over 9x. So 27 divided by 9 is 3. X to the third divided by x to the first. Larger exponents in the numerator, so the base is going to land in the numerator. 3 minus 1 is 2. 18 divided by 9 is a positive 2. And then x squared divided by x, 2 minus 1 is going to give me to the first power. Okay, so I'm going to come back here, make sure that I'm correct. Here I got 3x to the second power. And then here I got 2x to the first power, but we don't need to type into that caret key 1. Okay, we can just leave that as 2x. And then putting these together to make the polynomial, we have 3x to the second power plus 2x. Okay, I'm going to try to do this next one here without writing it down, okay, because eventually once we get the hang of this, we're probably going to be able to do most of this mentally. So here I have negative 90, and I'm going to be dividing this by 10. Negative 90 divided by 10 is negative 9. And then x to the fifth divided by x to the first would be x, and then to the fourth power. Negative 80 divided by 10 is negative 8. And then x to the fourth divided by x would be x to the third power. And then 20 x squared divided by 10x. 20 divided by 10 is 2. X to the second divided by x to the first would be x to the first, or just x. So yes, now I have all of my individual terms. I need to put them together. I have negative 9x to the fourth power. And then I have a minus 8x. So I'm going to type in minus 8x to the third. And then I have a positive 2. So I'm going to put in plus 2 and then an x. Okay, I think I'm going to do one more with you, and then I'm going to let you try. And you'll be able to know if you're doing these correctly by seeing if your cells are turning green. All right, so on this next one, I have 40x to the sixth power, and I'm dividing it by x squared. Okay, so 40, there's technically a 1 in front, so 40 divided by 1 is 40. And then x to the sixth divided by x to the second, 6 minus 2 is going to give me x to the fourth power. Negative 8 divided by 1 is negative 8. X to the fourth divided by x to the second is x to the second. 12 divided by 1 is 12. X to the third divided by x to the second is x. And then negative 1 divided by 1 is negative 1. And then x to the second divided by x to the second would just cancel out. Okay, so I had to put this minus 1 here because I didn't have a variable to put. You don't have to put the 1 if it's a coefficient, but you have to put the 1 if it is a constant. Okay, and so since the variable canceled out, that made that negative 1 a constant, so I had to have the 1. Putting this all together to get my final answer, I have 40x to the fourth power, and then a minus 8x to the second, and then plus 12x, and then minus 1. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the rest of these for you to try. So you should have 5 more here on your own. If you are getting really stuck, I will also have posted an answer key on Google Classroom. But the thing is, before you get your homework, which will just be a continuation of this, a little partner activity with 6 questions for each partner, before you get that worksheet, what you're going to have to do is show me that you have all of these are green cells saying, hey, I've got my notes complete, I understand this, and then move on to the worksheet. All right, thanks for watching.